Hello and welcome to another episode of Out of Spec Bits. You join three of us virtually. I'm in North Carolina, Jordan is in Colorado, and John, where are you joining us from?
Michigan.
Oh, cool. Michigan. Sweet. Well, so John and his team just did something really cool in a Silverado EV. And John is from the Chevy team, and we love the Silverado EV. Jordan, we've done thousands of miles in that thing. We've road tripped it across the country. We've towed with it, and it really is an awesome electric truck because General Motors just stuffed a bunch of batteries in it, and that's kind of what you need with a truck. And it really does work in the real world. High power charging, big range, and pretty good range while towing is really awesome. So we love that truck. Jordan, you have anything to say about Silverado EV before we announce what the heck the Chevy team did with it?
Yeah, I mean, it rides really comfortably too. So it is kind of that Swiss Army knife vehicle that, like you said, road trips well, tows well, spacious cabin. I mean, on our cross country trip, we did, four guys were sitting in that thing for 2,200 miles nonstop. Didn't hear many complaints. And yeah, the range while towing is one of the big factors. And it really is what makes the Chevy Silverado, especially the work truck, like an actual work truck. It's not just called work truck because it's got, some base options or whatever. It's like one that people actually use to work. And so it's actually one that I enjoy driving regardless of the scenario, whether I'm out driving to the store or actually towing something over the mountains. It all seems pretty reasonably usable.
Yeah, I think everyone knows we're pretty hardcore fanboys of the Sierra and Silverado just because of I just love the 24 module pack. 200 plus kilowatt hours. Hell yeah. But speaking of that battery capacity, John, your team just went from 100% to dead in a Silverado EV doing a test I have dreamed about doing for, I think, over a year now. We had this plan. We actually rented a track to do it. And unfortunately, it rained the entire time we had it rented. But you guys drove. Well, I'll let you make the announcement. Tell everyone how far you guys drove on a single charge, which is just a really cool thought experiment.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we went on one full charge. We went 1,059 miles.
Dude, that's freaking epic. So we did we actually had the Porsche engineering team do a simulation for us to see if this was possible. And I only Porsche just because we're friends with those guys. So I was like, guys, take a Silverado. Here's the rough CD. Here's the frontal area. Here's all the other stuff we would expect. And we were going to do it on an oval road course. And they were really worried about the scrub of turning even at low speed over 1,000 miles. But we wanted to do 1,000 miles on a charge. And it was a really tough task. And it was going to take a really long time. And unfortunately, the weather got in the way. So maybe you can share a bit about the truck you used, the scenario you used. Because one thing I found interesting was you guys actually did this on real roads. You didn't rent a facility. You actually drove 1,000+ miles on a charge on public roads, which to me is really, really impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we were talking about this, we were out of the Milford Proving Ground. So we have all the test tracks we could have used to do this. And as we were doing our projections early on, we sort of landed on, we knew we could do 1,000+ if we did it on a closed course. We have tracks on grounds. We did testing. We knew we could do that easy. We don't have any other variables to worry about there. We didn't think we could get 1,000 on public roads, but we still thought the story of getting 800, 900, whatever it was on public roads is cooler than saying, hey, we were on this closed test track that nobody else has access to and we got 1,000 miles. It's kind of okay, so what? As it turned out, as the test went on, we started getting closer and realizing, wow, we may actually hit 1,000 on public roads, which is sort of the best of both worlds. So I'm glad we ended up doing that, for sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about the truck that you guys used. Obviously, we discussed, big ass batteries, 200+ kilowatt hours usable, which is great. But also, over such a long period of time, I think it mentions you took almost 7 days to complete this or so. There's a lot of parasitic losses that can come running headlights, running HVAC, running blah, blah, blah. So maybe you can talk about the truck and the setup and the testing procedures. A little bit, because that's the stuff that Jordan and I nerd out about all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a brand new 2026 Silverado EV work truck to do this on. It actually had 16 miles when it was delivered to us, so it was brand new. Mainly on the truck side, we prepared it in a couple of ways. We did a couple of full charges and full depletes. That helps our battery algorithms to estimate capacity of the pack and give us more accurate data as we go through the actual test. So the truck actually ended up having, I think, around 500 miles on it when we started the true test. And then obviously there were some things that we did to prep the truck for this, some sort of modifications, you might say. One of the bigger ones is we put on some pretty worn tires from one of our test trucks instead of the brand new tires that the truck had on them, obviously. We inflated those to their max allowable PSI, minimize rolling resistance. And we lowered our windshield wiper blade position as low as we could and still have them in a functional range so that the arrow across the hood wasn't dragging. We moved the spare tire for weight. We put it on an alignment rack and just dialed it absolutely in 110%. So it was perfect. Like you mentioned, for parasitics, we didn't allow any climate control while drivers were driving, so that was off completely. We did have the windows cracked because it was hot most of the days. It was in the 90s or upper 90s, which actually that helps for our battery. That's kind of where our batteries are in its happy place, and it's not going to try to condition itself either way. So that was all good. And truck wise, that was the main stuff. The rest of it was, behavioral, how you're driving and where you're driving.
I guess you also had a tonneau cover was also included, right?
Yes.
Which would definitely help a little bit with the aerodynamics.
Yes. Yeah, I missed that one. We had a hard tonneau cover on there too.
So, John, what was the speed range that you were primarily driving in? Because you would think at low speed, aero kind of matters less, which actually that's where it makes sense to keep the windows cracked a bit and HVAC off. But how did that work? Did you ever have to, what was like the highest speed they hit and what was the average target driving speed?
I would say average was around 20 to 25. That's where we wanted to try to have people stay. But the reality is we were on public roads for all of this. So we only did that when it was safe to do that. So we tried to find roads that are 30-mile-an-hour roads or whatever to do that, but you still have to get there. So we drove on 50-mile-an-hour roads. I mean, the fastest speed people probably went 50 for periods of time. But on average, we were around that 20 to 25 range.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And, you mentioned the temperature range being really good for the battery pack. I totally agree. And for those two reasons, one of the reasons you mentioned was obviously you're not going to have any cooling or heating of the battery, so less parasitics. But also when the battery is warm, you get the most amount of usable capacity out of it. And I would be so curious to see, this has got to be the highest usable capacity ever pulled out of a 24 module battery pack because the draw is so low, the heat loss is so low, and you're just going for such a long time. We saw this recently. One of our friends did a range test on a Cadillac Escalade IQ, same battery or nears makes no difference. At 70 miles an hour, he pulled a few percent less kilowatt hours out of it than at 60 miles an hour. And it's something that we see with every electric car in our testing. So I don't know if you have that data, but do you know how many kilowatt hours you actually got out of it during the test?
I don't know exactly how many we got out of it, but you're absolutely right. The slower you are drawing energy from the pack, the longer you can extend it, especially at the end of life there. So it makes sense. We saw that at between 70 and 60, and certainly us doing 25 miles an hour at the end of our test, we're stretching it about as far as you can go.
Yeah, dude, that is so cool. So tell us about the beginning of the test. When you charged it up to 100%, did you drive away as soon as it completed at 100%? Did you then run the test 24 hours nonstop? Did you do, break at night, start back up the next day? How do you handle phantom drain? Do you keep the 12 volt on a charger? Like, what did you do to kind of manage the electrical situation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing, charging wise, we charged it, the last bit of the charge, we charged it very slow on a 110 to make sure that cells were as balanced as they possibly could be when we got to top of charge, to make sure we had as much of the usable pack as we could get. but from there, we unplugged and pretty much just went for a drive and started driving that day. I think the restriction we had is we kind of made this sort of a team building event. So we just opened up the signups for anyone who wanted to be a part of setting a record. We had 40 people signing up, getting in and out of the truck. Obviously, they were all doing it during their normal business hours. So we only really ran more or less business hours. So we left it in storage overnight. We just park it. We did put a 12-volt tender on it to minimize parasitics. We also had it in transport mode that helps, not run all the modules like it normally would. So that helped a little bit with that aspect of it. But otherwise, that's really all we did, from the 12-volt side.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. Jordan, would you partake in this? I feel like you should have had some of us come and join, because I would have gone up there and been a driver for this program.
Yeah,
I would totally be a part of something like this. If something ridiculous and silly, but like makes such a cool statement, especially when people are, still living in this age of fearful of range anxiety and stuff. It's like, well, on one hand, if you put crazy amounts of batteries in something, you can go a long ways. But on the other hand, it really shows how low speed can really impact range. I mean, people don't always realize, if you start getting really low, you can extend range drastically by just going very slow. I mean, I experienced this with our recent race we did where I was in a Chevy Spark EV, and I was like, you know what? I can get 8 miles per kilowatt hour if I just go really slow right now, just on little side country roads, and it worked really well. So I would have totally been a part. Do you know how much total driving time it was of, I guess business hours for how many days?
Yeah, total it was somewhere around 45 hours of driving. About 40-ish people doing 1 hour stints for the most part. It's a lot. It was great. It's great we had that big team to do it, because without climate control, you're in that truck for about an hour. You start sweating pretty bad when it's 95 degrees out. So it's nice to be able to rotate around a little bit.
Yeah, so I just did a rough calculation, speaking of efficiency, guessing, I'm just spitballing numbers. I'm assuming you pulled somewhere around 221 to 225 kilowatt hours out of this thing. You went 1,059 miles. So I just found, 4.7-ish miles per kilowatt hour efficiency of just back of the napkin math. That's insane efficiency for such a big truck. And it totally, sort of mirrors Jordan's point there, where if I'm on track, like I had that same Chevy Spark on the racetrack yesterday. I was taking my dad for a hot lap in it. By the way, Chevy Spark, best electric car ever made. And I was taking my dad for a hot lap in that thing, and we were getting like 1 mile per kilowatt hour, 0.9 miles per kilowatt hour. Meanwhile, Jordan drove and got 8. So it's so hard to actually communicate usable range to the end consumer, because it is 100% dependent on driving style and conditions. This is the same for combustion vehicles as well. So, when we talk about the EPA rated range, when most of our viewers and most of your customers are discussing how far does a car go on a charge, it's in a set drive cycle or series of drive cycles that the EPA has predetermined as allowable calculations. So this same vehicle that you just did 1,059.2 miles on a charge on is EPA rated still at a very impressive 493 miles without a tonneau cover. So that's pretty impressive for model year 26. The other side of it is if you take this Silverado EV and you put 12,000 pounds on or 10,000 pounds on the back of it and take it up I-70, you're going to get less than 493 miles on a charge. So it is completely dependent on use case. And I love that you guys proved really how much you can actually extend it. And speaking of that, the previous record was set by Lucid, which was also on public roads, I believe, and they did over 700 miles on a charge. They are much smaller, much more efficient, much less weight and all the other stuff, and with a much smaller battery pack. But this just shows, we always say the old school American way was no replacement for displacement. Now we go no replacement for big ass batteries. So it just shows big batteries win again. John, do you have anything to say to any of that?
No, I mean, one comment I'll make, you're doing the calculations. Our average across our whole drive was actually 4.9 miles per kilowatt hour. And if this is something that you wanted to go do sometime, you could definitely beat our record. Like we left meat on the bone because we had some drivers that were up as high as 6.5 miles per kilowatt hour for 25-mile stints. Some that were as low as 3.5, right? So even just optimizing that and the routes, like you can get 100, even 200 more miles than we did.
Yeah, I mean, the original goal was when we rented PPIR. First of all, that's at high elevation, so less air density, so that's a win. And unfortunately, the weather happened. But we had a big work truck spec on test from you guys already. So we were talking to your team. We're like, all right, let's figure this out. I had one of those Sprinter vans, and we were actually going to run. The goal was to see really how far could you go on a charge. So we were going to run with the back doors open to create a wind sail and just ride the bumper for like a week. Or I think we actually calculated, Jordan, it was like 3.5 days of constant driving was the plan.
I was going to say it would take a long time to do this test. And again, John, you did it on public roads. It would be wild to see what you could have done if you had done it on your proving grounds. I know that told a cooler story on public roads, but like if you guys had fully optimized proving grounds, maybe even a sail like Kyle said, although low speeds, it's not really so much about the aerodynamics, but still plays a part. Every little thing plays a part, and every little thing, every little piece of drag or drain is exponential over that amount of time. So yeah, I guess let us know which of your team did 6 or better miles per kilowatt hour, and then we'll take those guys. And
yeah, we want the efficient guys.
Those numbers are very achievable by most people on a closed track, honestly, like very repeatable there. And if you got into doing drafting and things like that, you're going to be pushing even beyond that. So, yeah.
All right. So 1,500 miles. Next stop, 2,000 miles. Let's go see how far this thing can go. And actually, I would bet even just doing it nonstop without resting points would help as well. I mean, there is a lot of room for optimization, but the fact that you kind of just drove normally, like it does actually probably simulate a use case of some of these vehicles, which would be like security guard vehicles, or if you're just a retiree living in the villages, you could probably go a year without ever recharging your Silverado. Which would be hilarious. So, doing it on public roads is really cool. I love that you guys do cool stuff like this. I mean, we've been talking about it too, but it just feels like GM as a whole, and especially Chevy's kind of on a roll right now, doing all the Nürburgring stuff and then setting the longest range record. I mean, the coolest of combustion and coolest of electric. We're kind of in for it, and I love this stuff. So props to you guys for doing something cool. I just think invite us next time you do a cool electric thing, because we want to join.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
All right, Jordan, anything you want to ask John before we wrap this up?
No, I just think it sounds like a really fun project. I guess last question is how much planning did you do? Like how many months were you like theorizing everything and doing all the calculations, or did you guys just kind of throw it together somewhat last minute and say, you know what, this truck's big, let's do it?
Well, it's interesting because we started talking about it last fall, and the first thing we realized was we got to wait for temperatures to be where we need to be, right? So we knew we had more time than we needed because it was, say, October, and we knew we weren't going to run until summer. So we knew we were going to do it back then, but we weren't really working that much on it at that point. It was sort of a bunch of engineers that were thinking about ideas, and every once in a while in our Slack chat, we'd be like, hey, let's do this. Like, have you guys thought about doing this? And then somebody drive the truck home or do a coast down test or whatever it was and be like, yeah, this thing really helped. And so those ideas kind of built up over those 6 or 8 months or so. But yeah, I mean, to your point, you can over engineer this as much as you want. We kept a pretty like basic level of realism by saying, let's just do it on public roads. Let's not do anything that a customer in theory couldn't do. Right? Like we're not modifying software. We're not doing anything crazy with that. But let's just get out there and see how many miles we can drive it. Because the most impactful things aren't those little things. It's the big things. Like, where are you driving? How fast are you going? What are you thinking about? Are you looking ahead? Are you, those sorts of things are what make the biggest impact. And as long as you do those, you can get a pretty impressive number.
I know what I meant to ask. At the end, how far did you run it out? Did you go till it stopped moving in turtle mode, or what? What was that like?
Yeah, it's actually funny. One of you said this earlier, but when we were running out, obviously, you've probably, I don't know how low you've gone on a GM EV, but we have
We've run them
several.
all to dead. Every
There you
single
go.
one.
Okay. So, you know, we have several modes of like, it's no mystery that you're running out of energy by the time you get there. Once we reached kind of our low, where we don't give you a range anymore, and we just say low battery charge now. I was driving with GM's YouTube channel host. We got in and we're like, okay, let's run it out. He's like, all right, let's do this. And we're going around Belle Isle, which is about a 5.5 mile loop. And he was expecting like, oh yeah, we'll, a couple miles and we'll be out. And so we're on like our 5th lap and he's sweating. He's like, what are we doing? Like, is this thing not done yet? And it just kept going and going and going, So to your point earlier, like, when you're really trying to get where you need to go, we got another, I think, 40 miles after it was in that final range. You could have made it to any of the charge stations close to us if we were going there. We weren't going to try to go there, but 40 miles is a lot.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, if you're extra gentle on it down low, you can almost just squeak out a little bit more, which is nice. Something we've found a lot in our testing. Typically, our tests, we run 70 mile per hour range test, and we just keep the pedal matted until it stops moving completely. But yeah, I mean, I think the GM like end of life stuff or end of driving life stuff is pretty good. I mean, you're not going to be questioning running out, and there is typically a buffer as long as the BMS is calibrated down there. It doesn't really come as a surprise. Did you throw it on a tow truck after, or did you do a vehicle to vehicle charge, or what did you do at the end?
We did a vehicle to vehicle charge, but then we put it on a tow truck. We just did a partial charge vehicle to vehicle so that we could just drive it around to the chargers and stuff when we got it back. We had to have it back to the next day for a media event, so we just wanted to get it up there and back to Milford.
Cool. Well, that all sounds pretty cool, John. I love that you guys are doing cool stuff like this. I really hope you continue to do more. Because we do need like cool companies showcasing what cars can do, even if it's not something that relates to everyone. It's a cool talking point, a cool story, and cars are meant to have cool stuff done with them. So thanks for arranging all of that, and thanks for coming on our show to talk to us about it as well. We appreciate it. A lot of our viewers drive Chevy electric vehicles, specifically Silverados. We have a ton of Silverado EV owners watching. If any of you guys out there want to go and replicate this, let us know ahead of time. We'd love to join. And we'll see you all in another one again soon. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.